Your salary does not decide whether you become wealthy. The version of you that earns $74,000, keeps the same apartment, drives the paid-off car, and quietly saves 40% finishes, with more investable capital and a far smaller lifestyle to fund, than the version of you that earns $140,000, upgrades the house and car with every raise, and spends most of it. Over 35 years at a 7% real return, the higher saver ends with roughly $2.1 million, while needing only $36,000 a year in retirement spending. The higher earner who lets lifestyle expand ends with less than half that balance and still requires $90,000 a year just to keep the same visible standard going. That gap is not created by the size of the paycheck. It is created by the single number almost no one tracks in real time: your savings rate. By the end of this video, you will know exactly how that rate on your own paycheck determines both how much you accumulate and how little you actually need to live well. You will see the math applied to two parallel versions of your ordinary working life: the quiet double charge of every raise you convert into spending, and the structural moves that raise the rate without anyone noticing. Your income is not the lever. The fraction you decline to spend is. That is the stealth wealth advantage, and it starts working the moment you stop expanding the lifestyle that keeps moving the finish line farther away. Picture two parallel versions of your working life, both starting today at age 30 and running for the next 35 years. Version A earns $74,000 a year. You keep the same one-bedroom apartment, drive the car you already own, eat most meals at home, and take modest vacations. Your savings rate sits at 40%. Version B earns $140,000. With every raise, you upgrade the apartment, lease a nicer car, eat out more often, and expand the lifestyle so that the higher paycheck mostly disappears. Your savings rate stays near 8%. Start with the tax and take-home math, under 2026 rules, single filer. Standard deduction is $16,100. For version A, taxable income after the deduction is roughly $57,900. You land mostly in the 12% and 22% brackets. Federal income tax comes to about $7,400. Add FICA at 7.65%, and you pay another $5,660. Total federal burden sits near $13,000. After state taxes in a moderate state, you clear roughly $57,000. At a 40% savings rate, you invest $29,600 a year and live on about $44,400. Version B starts with $140,000. Taxable income after the standard deduction is about $123,900. You move deeper into the 22% and 24% brackets. Federal income tax rises to roughly $22,500. FICA takes another $10,700. Total federal burden exceeds $33,000. After state taxes, you clear around $100,000. At an 8% savings rate, you invest only $11,200 a year and spend nearly $89,000. Now project both forward under identical assumptions: 7% real annual return, contributions invested at the beginning of each year, no extra windfalls. Version A's $29,600 annual investment compounds to approximately $4.1 million after 35 years. Version B's $11,200 compounds to roughly $1.55 million. The balance is only half the story. What matters is the lifestyle each version must fund once the paychecks stop. Apply the 4% withdrawal rule. Version A needs $44,400 a year to maintain the same quiet standard. That requires a portfolio of about $1.1 million. Version A finishes with a surplus of nearly $3 million. Version B needs $89,000 a year to keep the expanded lifestyle. That requires $222.5 million. Version B finishes short by almost $700,000 and must either cut spending sharply or keep working. This is the dual-sided mechanism of the savings rate. Raising the rate does two things at once. It increases the dollars that go into the market every year, and it simultaneously lowers the annual spending number that the portfolio must support. The same behavior that builds the larger pile also shrinks the target the pile has to hit. That is why the $74,000 earner who saves aggressively can finish ahead of the $140,000 earner who does not. Lifestyle inflation charges you twice. Suppose you receive a $6,000 raise. In version B, you convert most of it into higher monthly spending. An extra $400 for the nicer apartment, $150 for the car payment, $100 for dining out. Your new spending baseline rises by $6,500 a year. That higher baseline must now be funded for the rest of your working life and then in retirement. The same dollars that could have been invested at 7% are instead spent, and the retirement target moves farther away by another $162,500 in required capital. You pay once in lost compounding, and again in a permanently higher finish line. National data shows how common the low savings path has become. The U.S. personal saving rate has hovered between 2.7 and 3.5% through much of 2026. Vanguard's most recent How America Saves data shows median 401k balances for workers in their late 30s and early 40s, still under $50,000. Most people are running version B by default. The progressive structure of Social Security and the tax code actually favors the lower spending path. Benefits are tilted toward lower lifetime earners, and the lower taxable income of version A keeps more of each additional dollar inside the lower brackets. If this has changed how you look at your own paycheck, stay with me for the practical part. Even if you are starting later, the same lever still works. Suppose you are 42, currently earning $95,000, and have only $40,000 saved. You raise your savings rate from 10% to 35%. You invest roughly $33,000 a year for the next 23 years. At 7% real return, that produces about $1.9 million. If you keep spending under $55,000, the 4% rule requires only $1.375 million. You still finish with a surplus. The rescue does not require a higher salary. It requires the decision to stop expanding the lifestyle and to let the savings rate do the quiet work. The pattern is consistent. The person who looks ordinary while directing a large fraction of every paycheck into investments ends with both a larger portfolio and a smaller number that portfolio has to support. The person who converts raises into visible upgrades ends with the opposite. Your salary sets the size of the pie. Your savings rate decides how much of that pie compounds for you and how large a lifestyle the compounded capital must one day replace. The decisive number is now clear. Your savings rate simultaneously grows the portfolio and shrinks the lifestyle it must support. The next step is to turn that rate into a repeatable structure, so the advantage compounds without constant willpower. Begin with the exact account order that maximizes stealth accumulation under 2026 rules. First, contribute enough to your workplace 401k or similar plan to capture the full employer match. That match is free money and the highest guaranteed return available. The employee elective deferral limit for 2026 is $24,500. If you are 50 or older, the catch-up adds another $8,000, or $11,250 if you fall in the special 60 to 63 window. The overall annual additions limit, including employer contributions, is $72,000. After the match is secured, fund a health savings account if you have a high deductible plan. The HSA is triple tax advantaged and can be invested for retirement medical costs. Next, fill a traditional or Roth IRA up to the 2026 limit of $7,500, about $8,500 if 50 or older. If your income exceeds the Roth limits, use the backdoor Roth method. Only after these tax-advantaged accounts are maximized do you move to a taxable brokerage account. This sequence keeps the largest possible fraction of every dollar growing without annual tax drag and without any outward signal of wealth. The employer match alone carries lifetime weight. Suppose your company matches 50% on the first 6% of salary. On a $74,000 income, that is an automatic $2,220 each year. Invested at 7% real for 35 years, that single stream compounds to more than $300,000. On the $140,000 income, the same match percentage produces $4,200 annually and compounds past $580,000. Leaving the match on the table is the equivalent of declining a raise that never appears on your pay stub and never triggers lifestyle pressure. Delay carries a concrete cost applied directly to you. Assume you currently invest $20,000 a year, missing one full year at age 30, then resuming for the remaining 34 years, reduces the final portfolio by roughly $280,000 at 7% real. The lost year is not simply $20,000. It is $20,000 plus 35 years of compounding. Every subsequent year of delay shrinks the gap further but never erases the early deficit. The quiet decision to begin this month, even with a smaller amount, protects the largest possible compounding window. The structural way to raise your savings rate is the fixed cost audit. Most spending that expands with income sits in a handful of recurring categories: housing, transportation, insurance, and subscriptions. List every fixed monthly outflow. For housing, calculate the percentage of take-home pay it consumes. If it exceeds 30%, examine whether a smaller unit, a longer commute that eliminates car ownership, or a housemate returns more than the lifestyle cost. For transportation, compare the full monthly cost of a car payment, insurance, fuel, and maintenance against the combination of public transit, occasional ride shares, and a paid-off older vehicle. Insurance can often be lowered by raising deductibles or shopping the same coverage every 2 years. Subscriptions and memberships rarely justify their cumulative total once written down. The audit does not require daily restraint. It changes the baseline so that a higher percentage of every future paycheck is automatically available for investment. Once the fixed costs are reset, raises flow into the savings rate by default, rather than into lifestyle expansion. Different savings rate percentages buy you clearly different timelines to financial independence, measured as the point where invested assets equal 25 times annual spending. At a 10% savings rate, the required working years stretch past 50. At 20%, the horizon shortens to roughly 37 years. At 30%, it falls to about 28 years. At 40%, you reach the target in approximately 22 years. At 50%, the number drops to 17 years. At 60%, it becomes 12.5 years. These figures assume a constant real return of 7% and no pensions or Social Security. They illustrate the nonlinear power of the rate. Each additional 10 percentage points does not add a fixed number of years. It removes a larger and larger slice of the remaining timeline, because both the accumulation speed and the spending target move in your favor at the same time. The practical sequence is therefore simple and invisible. Capture the full match immediately. Complete the tax-advantaged accounts in order. Run the fixed cost audit once, and lock in the lower baseline. Then let every subsequent raise increase the savings rate rather than the lifestyle. The result is a growing portfolio that no one has to see, and a spending level that the portfolio can comfortably support decades earlier than the expanded lifestyle alternative. The salary still matters as the starting input. The savings rate remains the lever that converts that input into actual independence. This framework does not apply when income itself is the binding constraint. If your earnings sit near or below the level required for basic housing, food, transportation, and healthcare in your area, the primary task remains increasing earnings. Savings rate math cannot create margin that does not yet exist. The same holds for periods of genuine financial shock, major medical costs, sudden job loss, or supporting dependents with no other resources. In those windows, the priority is stability, not optimization. Once a durable surplus appears, the savings rate lever becomes available again. For everyone else, the core reframe is straightforward. The decisive number is not the size of the paycheck. It is the fraction of that paycheck you deliberately decline to spend. That fraction simultaneously builds the portfolio and shrinks the lifestyle the portfolio must one day replace. No one else has to see the balance, the contribution rate, or the quiet decisions that keep fixed costs from expanding. The advantage compounds in private. If you want the next layer of the same approach, the video on building a simple investment system that runs without constant attention sits linked at the end. Now I want to hear from you. What is your actual current savings rate? The real number, not the one you intend to reach. When did you first notice that higher income was not automatically producing quiet security? And if you have already run a high savings rate for any length of time, was the invisible trade-off worth it? Drop the answers in the comments. I read every one of them.